very much indeed, Dermot. Keeping us on time and ahead of schedule, so we're doing well today. I'd like to introduce you now to Bernard Higgins from Bank of Ireland, engineering and energy manager, and he's worked across the UK, US and Spain, and the Bank of Ireland engineering team responsibilities fall into three key areas: facilities management, responsible for the specification management of corporate FM services for 350 sites across Ireland and Britain.
Approximately, yeah.
That's it. Just a quick reminder again, just to send in your questions and we'll collate them just before the coffee break. Over to you, Bernard.
Hi, thanks Conor and thanks Ronan for giving me the opportunity here today to talk about Bank of Ireland and our approach to energy management. The presentation here today, that's our iconic 2 College Green building down in Dame Street. I had used an Earth Hour photograph we took, but it didn't come out too well, so I went for the St Patrick's Day Festival weekend one. In terms of the presentation here today, it's going to break into 3 parts. Basically, a background into the overall group responsible business strategy, our involvement with ISO 50001 in terms of how that it operates within the group, and other energy initiatives that are in operation across our 350 odd sites. So just to begin, this is an extract from our social responsible report that was issued in February 2015. I just want to draw your attention to a couple of key dates here. I'm not going to go through the whole history of the organisation. We date from 1783, which is when the bank first started out. In terms of the first ATM, 1980. Key dates in recent years, 2011, taxpayers' support to the bank totaling 4.8 billion. Why it's important is it was repaid in 2013 at 6 billion. Particular interest to us all as taxpayers, but more importantly, now that we're back in the black, it'll be interest to those of you who are selling products and services that we're in a position now to be able to engage in a way that during the dark days of the last few years was extremely difficult, where our survival was paramount and every euro really counted. Sorry. So in terms of the service provided, it's the whole gamut of financial services, from children's savings accounts to financing wind turbines and everything in between. Basically, I want to just talk about my own engineering team in terms of what we do for the group. It's a small enough team. There's 5 engineers of a group of about 30 property professionals involved in health and safety, involved in estate management and soft services management. So the key areas, as Conor said, for my own team are facilities management. We have an outsourced arrangement across the entire estate between GB, NI and Republic of Ireland. Basically, we have one supplier for hard services. We work with those guys to ensure that all the buildings operate from a day-to-day basis. The next would be project management, where we'd be involved in the fit-out of new retail units, administration sites, etc. Energy management, the key piece here today, so we're responsible for the implementation and operation of ISO 50001 and 14001. We get into some of the other aspects of that a little later on in the presentation. Just to give you a sense of the scale of it, it's about 2 million square feet in Ireland, and it's about a little over 500,000 in GB and NI. As mentioned earlier on, this is the responsible business report that the bank issued in February. It was focused on 5 key areas: the customers, communities, colleagues, environment and governance. The piece today I'm going to talk about is the environment. This is available on our website in PDF format if anybody wants to have a look for more information. So these are some notable milestones in terms of the bank. We're the first financial institution to be externally certified to EN 16001, and then we transitioned to ISO 50001. Carbon trading desk opened 2005. Participation with carbon disclosure projects since 2009. 311 schools participated in the junk couture in 2014. That's basically where you get the opportunity to make fashionable items out of everyday junk. Waste recycling rate of plus 90%. Bikes bought through the Cycle to Work scheme, which was heavily promoted within the organisation, at 2,553. Number of commercial wind farms financed by the bank, 10, with an output of about 350 megawatts. And we have energy use tracking on about 350 sites. Now, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. So, in terms of what is 50001, this is what it means to us. This is how we sold it internally in terms of what it would do for the organisation. So we see it as a framework for optimising energy efficiency in public and private sector organisations. Verification, an organisation is using energy as wisely as it can. Defined process to ensure legal compliance, key obviously with the upcoming legislation that's about to be landed on us all, and a way of achieving best practice in the area of energy management. Implementing and maintaining an energy management system such as 50001 will obviously save carbon emissions and money as well. In terms of the energy and CO2 reductions, they can be verified via the external audit process. What we would find a huge benefit of having external certification of our systems is it's not us correcting our own homework. Somebody's coming in, going over the books and saying, yes guys, you're achieving, and that's great to be able to sell this internally in terms of a real win for the organisation, to be able to promote it more within the organisation, to get the support that we would need from the senior exec team to be able to continue this work. It supports, as I mentioned previously, in terms of the responsible business endeavours that the bank are involved in. It supports our CSR strategy, and we're able to make claims with actual data. It's not greenwash, it's not whatever else you might want to call it. So it demonstrates a business doing what it can to make a difference. It's a key part for us. In terms of how it landed within Bank of Ireland, the key requirements that we found we needed to make a success of this was an executive sponsor. It wasn't going to happen if we didn't have the people at the highest level in the organisation ready to support us with the resources and with the other aspects of the implementation of such a system. It just wasn't going to happen for us. Technical support. We're fortunate enough to have guys who were up to speed in a lot of the systems where we could make the changes, the early wins, the low-hanging fruit in terms of tweaking BMS systems, in terms of aligning boiler operation or whatever else it might be to give us the quick wins in terms of energy management. Staff engagement was a key piece, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later on. Obviously, what we don't want is a load of text running around tweaking things and then complaints coming in terms of they're too hot, too cold, whatever it is. So it has to be aligned with what the staff require, enable them to do their work in a very productive fashion. The last bit I suppose the most challenging is procurement. During what we might call the dark days in terms of with the financial crisis, their focus is very much on every euro and protecting every euro that the bank had. So it was extremely difficult to get finance to implement new plant replacement strategies. We were in survival mode. As I mentioned, happily, we've moved on from that now. So why ISO 50001 in Bank of Ireland? Well, I explained in the previous slide in terms of what we believed it took to get it in. So why did we do it? We had ISO 14001 in operation on one of our sites out in Cabinteely. Back in 2008, as I mentioned, when we were extremely financially challenged as an organisation, there was a root and branch examination of all expenditure to see whether it was appropriate to be still engaged in certain activities. ISO 14001 in terms of the resources that I had to put into it from the manpower perspective or the financial costs in terms of having worked with external auditors, etc., whether that was still justified. And we actually turned that on its head and we said, well, do you know what? Energy is a huge aspect of our 14001. We're a reasonably clean business. Why don't we focus a lot of this endeavour upon what was then IS 393 EN 16001, and not alone would we be able to reap some reward in terms of the financial recoup of reducing our energy consumption. So it wasn't very difficult to sell. We had some good assistance in terms of our external auditors at the time who came in and spoke to senior manager and explained what other organisations were doing, what was coming down the tracks in terms of from a legislative perspective, and also the huge benefits that could accrue to the organisation by embracing this energy management system. So basically from that ISO 50001, it's certified on 2 of our large administration sites, which account for about 10% of our energy use. One of them is the data centres and our operations centre. Data centre was a great site to pick because it's chugging away 24/7. So any change we can make in the energy consumption there has an impact literally every hour of the day. We've also taken the learnings from 50001 and implemented them across a range of other administration sites, and they're on the road to certification, hopefully later this year. So, in terms of, this is our operations centre in Cabinteely. I suppose while all of this was going on, there was another piece in terms of the consolidation. The bank was shrinking a bit, but it was getting out of buildings in the centre of the city, it was moving staff around, it was going to a more agile type of working, where we were filling out the buildings that we remained in to the maximum capacity. I suppose what's interesting here is in terms of the energy use, I've got this here. So as you can see, square metres hasn't changed at all. The building's the same size. There's, in terms of our kilowatt hour per site, going the right direction. Per square metre, going the right direction. But in terms of use per head count, because we had more people in there, and I should say it's not as if we got one person per every 4 square metres of space. The minimum we applied to is about 1 in 6.5 is about as low as we go, and it really depends on the type of building we're dealing with, whether it lends itself, it has a good open plan and the capability to do it. In terms of the savings, I'll draw your attention to up here. You can read it off there in terms of yourself. We've got a saving of the other 23%, I think it is, over the 4 years that we've measured there. So clearly, it's doing something very beneficial to us. In terms of the SEUs, for those familiar with the ISO 50001, this is a typical breakdown of one of our admin sites. It falls out between air conditioning in the main, would account for between the AHUs, chillers, etc., would account for most of the energy use, lighting, and general services thereafter. So in terms of opportunities for improvement that we have implemented, lighting controls, change of lamps from T8s to T5s to experiment with LEDs and stuff like that, absolutely. Lighting controls, for my money, is a key one. The most efficient light is one that's off, so our starting point was to ensure that the lights were knocked off when they weren't in use, either by automated means or, given that we had a security presence on site, we could ensure that the guys, as part of their patrols, would ensure that only night light areas were illuminated. Staff communications. We've worked with several external parties in terms of getting the message across. I see some of them are here today. Very successful, having staff awareness days, tips for home and tips for office use. Really important to get the staff on board, because without their contribution in terms of understanding what we were trying to achieve, it just wasn't going to happen. There's no point in us trying to work in splendid isolation. We really need the staff to buy into it. Chiller upgrade. In terms of old stock, looking at the performance, the COP of some of the kit, and looking at payback and upgrading that type of equipment, we've implemented a few new chillers, and we've seen the benefits of doing that as well. Gas boilers to replace electric heating systems. On one of our sites, we had a very old system. It was a large old system that was terribly inefficient. So, some of this took new thinking, because the bank in this particular site was reluctant to use gas from a risk perspective. So we had to convince people that actually this was a pretty safe, which everyone will be happy to know at the top table here, that we are using gas now on that particular site. So huge benefits there. In terms of greater BMS control, that's really about aligning our BMS controls that controls all of the M&E equipment with the actual operation of the building, with the actual operating of the business in that building. It's really, really important to have two of those closely aligned, so we're not needlessly heating or cooling a building when there's nobody about. Sounds very obvious, but you'd be amazed how many times buildings would have their plant running and nobody in occupation. Temperature set points. This was a really easy win for us. This was on our data centre, where it was something I picked up from BT's guru on energy management, Chris Tuppen, where they jacked up the set points. Given the performance of IT equipment now, you don't have to have your data rooms at 18, 19 degrees. We jacked ours up to 23. Obviously the plant's not working as hard, not using as much energy. We get longer use out of the plant, and we have reduced energy costs. Size planned for the load. We would have had some old, in one of our data centres, we would have had some old UPS systems. We had a parallel arrangement, very inefficient, 300 kVA, 2 units. We replaced them with a modular UPS, which still gives us the security of resilience, but uses far less energy in its operation. Again, that was just a comparison, as I say, in terms of the admin sites and how we use our energy. As you can see, AC tends to come out on top for us. This is interesting in terms of it's one of our retail sites. I suppose when we mention 350 sites, we have everything from call centres to data centres to retail units that people will be familiar with where you do your banking, to large administration buildings. So branches can be quite challenging. Now, they're good in terms of they're simple, but they're challenging in terms of they're very old. If we look at College Green, 1808 that opened. So there's an acre of roof, there's 7 different roof systems, there's actually coal fires on the premises. There's quite a bit to be, it's quite challenging there. So in terms of the retail, we said, how are we going to manage this? Because everything is different. There's different systems. There's night storage heating, there's oil boilers, there's gas boilers, there's heat pumps, there's split units, there's whatever. So we said, without a management system to be able to see what's going on, we won't be able to actually manage it. So that led us to a group-wired energy management smart meter system, which we installed about 3 years ago. So basically every single site has the capability of monitoring its oil, its gas, its electrical and its water use where appropriate. Obviously not all sites have those 4 elements. But where they have, we're able to do it. Then we're able to develop league tables from that. We're able to see what sites are off the radar in terms of their energy consumption. Why is that the case? What's the out-of-hours energy consumption? Because the beauty of the retail is, as much as it's challenging, it operates from 9 to 5. So if I'm looking at a normal 20 kilowatt hour per hour consumption during the day, and at night I'm looking at 15, when I know I've really got a security devices and some night lights and some security lighting, and it should be 2 kilowatts, what's that about? So straight away I can home in and see, oh look, the AC was left on, the time clock is goosed, or we've night storage coming on a Friday and Saturday night, which is obviously unnecessary because we're closed both Saturday and Sunday. So through this, we were able to recognize the best way to manage our energy use was by measuring it. We were able to get a review of the utility costs, comparison between the different utility vendors, required metrics for legal compliance. We're able to see with some accuracy what our CO2 footprint is. Energy benchmarks, as I mentioned, league tables, do comparisons in like-for-like buildings. Identify and eliminate waste, as I mentioned. What's the consumption like out of hours? Why are we using that much energy out of hours? Use as a tool to prioritise and justify investment. What are the best performing sites? What are the worst performing sites? We focus on the worst performing sites. And then tariff management. So that's just a screenshot in terms of what the capability of the system is. It's, we can export the reports into Excel. We can play with the data. There's another feature of this now where we have some control. We give some IOs on the input-outputs on the smart meters. So we can actually now remotely shut down AC. It has that capability, or boilers, or whatever it is. This was something else of particular interest to us. We learned to our cost. We had 2 oil leaks on 2 of our retail sites down the country, which cost a serious amount of money to clean up. You're talking in excess of 300k. We were very fortunate it didn't get into a major groundwater system. One was trapped in a local well, and the other one soaked and needed just remediation on the site. For 10% of the cost, we were able to implement this system where we actually get daily updates of our oil tank consumption. This gives us lots of benefits. Obviously, environmental one I mentioned. If we get a rapid loss of oil, we're able to go in and see where the site is, what the issue. We can dispatch an FM tech to go out and check it out and address the issue. We're also able to organise our oil deliveries much more efficiently, because as you can see on the little dial there, on the little dial there, it sends a text. When it gets to 30%, it sends a text to say, I need to be filled up. So now it sends that to our oil supplier. So we don't even have to get involved. So the oil supplier reacts and is able to deliver the oil to the site as part of their milk run. Benefit for us is it's cheaper oil because they can do it in a more organised way rather than reacting where we run out of oil. The other issue is the sites don't run out of oil, so therefore we don't have to dispatch an FM to get rid of the airlocks or anything else, and an emergency fill of oil, and the trouble that the staff will have with no heat in their building. So there's a win all around for us in that. Now, in terms of this here, this was something that came out of our review of our energy, and it's again a very easy, quick win for people. This was an adjustment to our MIC, our maximum import capacity from our electrical supply. So there was a 43k simple paper-based exercise. Look at your energy consumption, match it against what your MSC is set at, and ensure that it's correct. And if it's not correct, talk to your utility and get it altered. There was a 43k saving there. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of communications, this was a key one for us to get the staff engagement. Now, in the last year or so, the bank has started this. I don't know if people are familiar with Yammer. It's a Microsoft product that you can use as a replacement for your intranet, or to work alongside your intranet. So what we have here is our own web page on Yammer. We can send out alerts. There's probably Robbie down there who works with me is probably sending something out in Yammer now to say that we're all here doing this presentation here today. It's a fantastic tool. It'll give you links to SEAI websites. It'll give you links to whatever we want to put up in terms of environmental or energy related topics. It's a comms tool to be able to cascade messages out to the wider group network. Really, really useful. In terms of the communications, as I mentioned, we had these energy awareness days, working with external parties to come in and use best practice to tell staff how they might be able to save energy at home. Enterprise Week, we've invited businesses onto a number of our admin sites to sell their wares, to show people what they can do. As you may be aware, the bank run Enterprise Week several times a year, and we would focus one of those a year on green enterprise, and that's the opportunity for people to go in and talk about whatever they want to in that space. Staff promotions. The bank have started a new group scheme where they're able to offer discounts. It's a bit like your Groupon or something like that. So again, there's opportunities for people who want to work with the bank in terms of promoting their own products, to use that as a tool. And then participation, obviously, in green promotional events such as this, where we engage to the wider, learn from our peers and share our experiences of what it means to be managing energy. The challenges, I suppose, hasn't all been fun. In terms of, there's an increased use of air conditioning. There's pros and cons to this, where we can replace an inefficient boiler with something that's capable of acting as a heat pump and air conditioning. Great. Maybe replace a boiler and an old aircon unit with that. Difficulty is, a lot in the retail network, a lot of our buildings are rabbit warrens, and it can be extremely difficult to heat and cool appropriately without a massive increase in replacement of plant and stuff like that. Finance, as I mentioned earlier on, very challenging for the last few years. Hopefully we've turned that corner, and long may it last. Security requirements, obviously we're a bank. Huge issues here. Value is what we call cash. Or cash is what we call value, whatever way you want to put it around. IT, huge concerns about penetration of our firewalls and stuff like that, IT. So anytime we want to get something done that's cloud-based, that immediately sets off alarms, and we have to go through a whole process with our group security team to validate and check and all the rest of that. In terms of customer and staff, we have a particular, obviously, duty of care to our staff and to our customers. So these are challenges in terms of trying to implement energy-saving things. People say, why have you got your lights on? Well, we knock off lights. We have to be able to segregate the bit that's over the ATM from the general external lighting, because if somebody rocks up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get money out and there's no, obvious, don't have to overstate that. Property strategy is a key one. This is where we know where we're going to be in 5 years. We can't spend $500,000 on a CHP or whatever it is if our strategy is to get out of that building. So this has been a challenge. As I said, there's been a lot of consolidation of sites into major hubs. And one announced last week in terms of Bagot Street, where the old Foss building we're moving into now. So that will result in the closure of a number of other less energy efficient buildings. So there will be a win in that for us in terms of our energy. It's really important to have a well thought out property strategy before you can make the investment. Otherwise, you don't reap the benefits over time. Proven technology. The bank is not very much on the bottom of the curve when it takes to accepting new technology and stuff like that. So we like to know that things are well tested and tried. How are things tested and tried and nobody tried? No, it's just one of those things, but that's the way we are. Procurement strategy is key, as I mentioned earlier on, in terms of the key components of a successful energy management system. Really important to work with your procurement department. It's been very challenging for us. Their focus hasn't always been our focus, and it's really explaining to them what it is we will have over the lifetime of a particular service or product that we're buying versus their quick win of getting it at the cheapest cost or whatever. In terms of the benefits of 50,001, this would be our experience, okay? So give a comprehensive insight into energy use, where this management is applied. Legal compliance, it's an obvious thing in terms of, with a certified, externally certified ISO 50001 system, somebody has said that you are compliant in terms of your energy audits and how you've approached your management of energy. It's possible to start reducing carbon emissions and energy costs immediately as wasteful energy use is identified and can therefore be eliminated. I mentioned about storage heaters being on, but you don't have to be, boilers running and all the rest of that. How will you know if you're not managing the energy? How will you know what's going on if you haven't given some focused attention to your use of energy? And it demonstrates an organisation's commitment to conducting business in a responsible way. So in summary, we believe it's management by measurement. 50,001 is an excellent way of achieving this. To manage your stakeholders, it's real data. You can go back to them and say, this is what we said we were going to do, here's the output, we've saved the 5%, whatever it is, and this is what we need to do next to get the next 3% or 4%, whatever. We build on our success, so we generate momentum, and it'll power your management system forward. That's what we would have found. It's just getting over that initial inertia. Once you get it moving, everybody gets it. The staff get it. Like, nobody by nature wants to be wasteful. The last piece I'll leave you with, it's about being a leader, I suppose, setting an example. And that can be a leader with a big L or a small. It really doesn't matter. What you're trying to do is influence the strategy. Where you have a touch point with the stakeholders is to be able to express what you feel is the way to go forward on that. Just a little we were successful in the past by following this strategy. There's some examples of that. And that's me. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions?